You had a certain sense of freedom that allowed you to experiment a bit more. Were you surprised by some of the things that kind of came out?
Well, it's hard to be surprised by stuff you do.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, but I was.
Or maybe something that you
I was
weren't sure
certainly
if
happy about it. I felt good about how things were turning out, especially because the stuff that we were doing earlier on wasn't, you know, it was okay. It wasn't getting me all very excited, you know. We even at the end of the last period of touring, we had a new song, in fact, that we were playing live at the end of the last tour, and then we finished that one. Even, you know, and that was, I guess, part of like what I thought the direction of the new stuff was going to be, and we just scrapped all of it.
Because did you have a thing in mind then of what you wanted to capture?
No, that was kind of good.
Yeah, I think probably beginning, as Jer said, the beginning, the first attempts or this completed song we were speaking of probably were too. It was still, you were kind of like stuck in the exact same trajectories. It's kind of hard to like make a. You kind of need some time, I think, to make a.
I mean, I had a couple basic rules that I was kind of rolling with a little bit from my end in terms of certain things I didn't want to repeat. I didn't want to. I felt like the two records before the new one, I think there was a lot of thinking about, at least for me, a lot of thinking about like songcraft. Okay. Doing a lot of sort of very kind of tricky, complex songcrafty things, sure. You know, melodic changes and modulation and all that kind of stuff. And I think there was some sense with this one where I wanted to take everything back to a much more loop, kind of like loopy, techno-y, sort of straight kind of place where there's not a lot of like sequential modulation happening in terms of the way the songs work, and focusing much more on like the feel of the things, the sounds, the loops themselves, the punch, the groove, all that kind of stuff was much more important to me than songcraft.
What inspired this? Because I read somewhere that the Detroit, the second wave of Detroit techno was an inspiration, or is kind of.
I mean,
that's always kind of.
Yeah, that's always. I mean, we've always been into that, but
that's kind of like the period in which we first got into that kind of music was sort of like at the tail end of when that stuff was first happening, the second wave stuff. So that's sort of like. Also, I think there's, because it happened just like the sort of like, just before we were being teenagers, sometimes these things that happen just before you were actually there, like, and weren't old enough to go out in 1992, you know what I mean? But it's like they have this kind of elusive quality.
I think basically I've always had the same general tastes that I circle around. You know, I listen to a lot of R&B. Okay. I listen to a fair amount of like American or Detroit techno or whatever. I listen to a fair amount of UK dance music, although maybe less so. And I listen to a fair amount of like experimental post-punk, synth pop, whatever. I've been listening recently to a lot more like kind of like new agey ambient music than I have in the past. But more or less, my tastes have been very similar. It's just certain things bubble up more at certain times. Like I felt on this record, we were like talking a lot more about our love of like kind of industrial music or industrial techno music and stuff like that. You know, a lot of, you know, American and European. Industrial dance music from the 90s. That's the stuff that we grew up on, and that we talked about that a lot more.
Yeah, was this the music that kind of brought you together in the beginning, or?
Well, that was the first electronic music I was ever
Okay.
into. When I was sort of 15 years old, the only electronic music I really knew was kind of either industrial dance music that kind of fed into techno, and the other stuff I knew was kind of, you know, people who were into like
Prog rock.
I was going to say rare groove, and that kind of moved in the world of house music, you know, like kind of like rare groove and
They say
soul.
synthesizer music.
No, yeah,
Okay.
dance music.
Yeah.
And well, with this in mind, you had kind of you wanted to take a step back and make it more go back to the basis, as you
Yeah.
say. When did the album start to take shape as it is now? Was that a long time ago?
No. I mean, certain songs started happening, and I can't remember the exact sequence, but even though the album took a long time to write, the songs themselves didn't take long at all.
Okay.
You know, it was not like the last couple of albums where it was working and reworking songs over and over again. Like, the songs were quick, they happened fast. The writing was fast.
It's more sifting through the songs than,
It was
than
yeah.
reworking an existing
Yeah.
thing to the. That can be a really exhausting process. When you
Yeah.
have the one song that gets worked on for 3 years, you really hate the shit out of that thing.
Yeah, that's something I really got from working with Jessy, where
Okay.
Jessy and I would just get things done so fast.
Because obviously it's the two of you, so is it difficult to pinpoint when a song is done or to stop tinkering and?
It could be. We had one funny experience on this album with this song called Love is a Fire, where I basically did this song, Love is a Fire, and I had this whole arrangement of it and more or less did this whole song. I wasn't happy with it at all.
Okay.
And then I sent it over to Matt, because usually we don't do that kind of sending around stuff. I sent it over to Matt and said, this song just doesn't work at all. Can you just completely rework it? Just do something completely different with it. And then he wrote almost completely different thing and then sent it back to me. And then I sort of reworked what he had done. And that's pretty weird for us.
Yeah, that's almost like we're.
Yeah.
Because usually
It's almost like remixing an existing
you get attached to things, or you try not to lose certain
Yeah.
elements. You know, you have your favorite parts of the song. Like you might like one sound or one chord change, and you're kind of, or you said married to it in a way. You're kind of like you can't get rid of this this single element. And usually the songs build around these things. But with this, it was kind of just like, yeah.
Was there one song that kind of functioned as a foundation in terms of the sound or in terms of the direction you wanted?
No.
I kind of feel like there's more than one direction in the record.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple songs that are. In some ways, I remember the song, which is called "Come On, Baby," which is the third track on the album, I think, as being like the first track I remember thinking to myself, "Wow, I actually like this.
Yeah.
Like this is." Like that was, I feel like that was the earliest, that's the oldest song I think on the record, because it was part of the group of songs that would have come from the earlier stuff. But it was, I think that would have been the sort of song that sort of was like, oh, this is a pretty weird thing, and we could do a whole record of weird things, you know.
Do you remember what started that song off?
I do know what started that song off, yeah, completely.
Was that then when you were in Spain?
Yeah, a trip to Madrid. I went
Okay.
to Madrid, and actually, this is kind of a decent story. I went to Madrid to DJ, and I was invited to to work in a studio for a day or something. And so I was in this studio, and then they had it was like a nice studio, and they had a whole bunch of little pieces of gear and stuff, and but they had a couple pieces of equipment that I was excited about. And one was an old phaser pedal that, well, that's not that important. But the thing that was important is they had a mellotron, you know, but a weird mellotron, like a new mellotron. It was like digitally controlled, but it was all the same old analog parts about the tape, how the old mellotrons work, you know, these old sampler, kind of proto-sampler thing. And so I just fiddled around with this mellotron string thing in Madrid, and that ended up being this sort of brrr sound that's on that forms the sort of foundation of
The song.
yeah, that song. But it was kind of a funny time because I was in Madrid and I was DJing with Code 9, and that night I was talking to him, and he asked me, well, what are you doing these days musically? And I said, oh, I'm working with this person, Jessy Lanza. He said, do you want to hear it? And he put it on and listened to it, and he said, I'll sign that.
Okay.
That's how Jessy Lanza got signed to Hyperdub, was that night.
So that was a good trip to Spain for you?
Yeah, it was a fortuitous trip to Spain, yeah.